Welcome to the Sweaty Pillow podcast. Today we have the most extraordinary guest. I've been fangirling in research mode for days now. The extraordinary Tamsen Fadal is here with us today. Welcome, Tamsen. Thanks for joining us.
Oh gosh, thanks for having me.
It's so big time because our podcast guests have consisted of really incredible doctors like Dr. Haver, of course, authors, fitness specialists, whatever. Having someone of your pedigree that's such a big time journalist is the perfect person to blow this entire conversation up. And we need to get the M factor to every single woman from 40 years old and up, because it is such an incredible piece of work. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have an incredible team that helped us put this together, and it was a labor of love. I never knew what that meant, and now I really, really do.
Is the last third of my life not as important as the middle third in my reproductive years?
I think that there is at least an understanding and awareness that women are not going to stand for it anymore. Women are waking up and saying, "What? No one ever told me this." Well, we should all know.
Yes, and it does take a village, doesn't it? But your personal voice behind this has been very impactful.
Thank you.
So biography, for everyone in our community will know who you are, but what I didn't really understand was just what a powerful journalist and career. You've won multiple Emmys and a military media award for your coverage on the war in Afghanistan. Like, this is as big time journalism as it gets. And now you're a menopause activist and advocate. So tell us about that journey from hard-hitting journalism to now becoming a menopause advocate.
Yeah, nothing that was planned, that's for sure. I was actually thinking about it. It's been a year since I left my job and ventured out into this full time. A year, to the day almost, really. But I spent about 30 years in journalism and loved every minute of it. Every day felt like the first time I did it, and I'll always be grateful for it. And I think what I'm most grateful for now is realizing that I could carry that part of my life and that storytelling into this area of advocacy. And so that's been really the true gift for me, of not switching careers, but really moving into a place of a different type of storytelling. And so, yeah, I covered all sorts of stories, all sorts of places, cities, countries. And I feel like the biggest story, though, right now is really what's going on with women and women's healthcare, and especially in particular menopause and women in this transition and space, whether it's in the workplace or at home or in the doctor's office. So that transition happened over time, gradually. I had an incident on the air. I went to the doctor. I got a note in my patient portal that said, "In menopause, any questions?" And I thought, wow, you're asking a journalist if they have any questions in menopause. So I had a lot, and I think I haven't stopped asking them. And the M factor is one part of that, one part of those answers. But I think that we all have a lot of questions, and I think we have very little research right now, and we need more, and we need better.
And in your journey, as you were kind of transitioning out of being a journalist into your work in menopause, do you see progression in government or the medical community already, just in the couple of years that you've been working on this?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of conversation with women demanding answers, which I am so grateful for. When we started working on the documentary, which was 3 years ago while I was actually still at work, there was very little conversation. I heard things like, is there going to be any audience for that? Like, who wants to talk about menopause? Like, I don't know. So we got a lot of pushback early on. Gradually, that let up a little bit, but really it was something where we said, like, we have to do this for these answers. And I'm seeing more of a conversation for sure. I'm definitely seeing more of a conversation when it comes to women in this community. They have taken this documentary, this film, and brought it into their communities. Some have rented theaters, some have rented huge spaces where they bring in hundreds of women. They spend their time, hours, days, weeks, planning community screenings to bring people in and then have a conversation afterward. So I would never have seen that 3 years ago. There's just no way. And so I'm so grateful for that. Like, we when we say that this is a movement that's being galvanized, like we're really seeing that. With regard to, legislation and policy, like I still think we have a ways to go. We still need more money. We need money, we need research, we need, that research executed. We need years to do that. And then we also, of course, have to make sure that the media plays a part in this, of making sure that information is put out the right way, which, I think when we look at what happened 20 years ago, we see how all of that unfolded, and such a shame for so many women. So I do feel really inspired. I love when doctors are standing up and talking, but we need to educate more. And that's what I hope that the film can at least help do. Maybe not educate them, but maybe open up that conversation.
Well, that's the work that you're doing to keep the conversation going. I do want to talk about the M Factor, because I did watch it. And I was telling you before we started filming that I actually got emotional as someone who wakes up in service of women every day for 12 years since starting Lucime. I felt things that I hadn't felt through the menopause conversation. I think because you're a master storyteller, but it was so brilliant, the synthesis that you did between the science, the data, the brightest minds in menopause, real women's stories, but at the very end, threading the story where I felt kind of angry at where we've got to without support, sad, and then hopeful at the end, Tamsen. It really, really connected with me emotionally, and I can't wait to everyone needs to see this.
Thank you. I thank you for talking about those emotions, because it's funny, as I've watched it now so many times, but as I continue to watch it, I think I always feel something a little bit different when I do, or see something a little bit different, even though we've been with it for a long time. But our director, Kobe Atlas, just did an incredible job of, really working to make sure we pulled out the right information, because we have so many hours of video that we're going to start releasing, like the longer forms of those interviews, because those interviews on for hours sometimes, but we only had a set amount of time to put together for the doc. And then my co-producers, Denise Pines and Joanne Lamarca Matheson, all of us worked together. Like every week we had multiple phone calls of who are we talking to? Why are we talking to them? Who are the women that we can pull into this to make sure that we hear ourselves in each one of their stories? And then what can we do to make sure each one of these areas breathes a little bit and has its own time, So we called it chapters of the film, to say the sex area, the brain area, talking about hormones, talking about workplace, talking about race, and making sure that, no area was left untouched, but that we could pack as much into that. So I appreciate you seeing that. And I think that's where those different emotions come from, because we all see it different things depending on, where we are in this journey.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And someone that's through menopause already, where was all this information 10 years ago? And I have always asked myself, why? How did we get here where there's not the resources and the support and the medical training and the open dialogue with women in their late 30s and 40s? Because every woman's going through it. Like, how is that like an underground, like almost dirty little secret and story? It frustrates me. There's one particular segment I want to refer to in the M Factor, because I got really emotional at 13 minutes that, brilliant Dr. Mosconi, the neuroscientist actually, and she's talking about her clinical trial and women's brains during menopause. It's fascinating. I'm taking notes. And then she switches to the cultural impact. And this was a quote by Dr. David Rubin in 1969, who's the author of Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask, which spent 55 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. And he says, once ovaries stop, the very essence of being a woman stops. A postmenopausal woman comes as close as she can to being a man, not really a man, but no longer functioning as a woman. What the absolute F?
I know.
I'm just like this. I was like shaking mad. That was like this come to Jesus moment watching your documentary.
Yeah. Isn't that unbelievable?
I mean, that says everything about why we are.
I didn't know that until we started going into that research, and I went, that book that we've talked about so often and so we knew was a bestseller, and people that didn't read it knew the title. But that lets you know how this narrative got here. When people say, how did we get here? We
Yeah.
got here because that repetitive narrative of talking down to women, of women not being seen. We say, why do women at this age feel like they're not relevant? Well, because that's what society has told us for a very, very long time. And, I will be among those not stopping until we change that narrative.
It was a fascinating moment of reflection, just seeing that in terms of just how it set women back. And I think it's Dr. Sharon that says, if we don't do anything, if we suffer in silence, which, by the way, our mothers were told, suffer in silence, everyone goes through it, suck it up, buttercup. And oh, by the way, like, once you can stop having babies for a man, you're kind of like useless anyway. It's like all of that played out in our mother's generation. But if we don't do something, we're actually causing a negative downstream impact to our quality of life and our health.
Yeah.
So that, there's some big takeaways on symptoms and treatment that you know of. And so I thought I would just, turn it over to you, and maybe you can share some of, your experience on the learning on options for women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can talk from my own experience because, I'm not a doctor. We did do a lot of research for the film. I mean, the options for me, I went from not knowing what to do. I lost my mother to breast cancer. So I had always heard in the back of my mind, or I knew in the back of my mind, estrogen was bad. That's all I knew. I didn't know why I knew that. I didn't know how I knew that. I just knew in the back of my mind, that was something that wasn't an option for me. When I hit menopause, I had no idea. And I thought, well, I've always been very healthy in how I approach life, so I'll be fine. I wasn't fine. Mentally, it really took me, it really locked me up. Physically, I felt awful. I couldn't get out of bed some days. I had no idea what I was going through, though, for those years. I had been going through a divorce. So I blamed everything on that. I didn't think like menopause. So when I had that incident at work, then went to the doctor and started walking around trying to figure out what I was going to do. I turned to the supplement route, and then I went to see a doctor, and she said, you need to figure out whether hormones are an option for you.
So I lost a lot of the confidence in the one thing that I knew how to do. If I can't ad-lib, if I can't read the teleprompter and the words that are in front of me, I can't be a journalist.
We sat down, we talked about it. I'd never had breast cancer myself. She said, you're a candidate for them. And I said, well, I'm too scared. And she said, well, why are you scared? And I said, I'm not sure, but I'm scared. And I saw what my mother went through. And then I realized that I had so much, after talking to her and after doing more research and doing more interviews and talking to doctors like Dr. Sharon Malone and talking to doctors like Dr. Lisa Mosconi or Dr. Haver, I realized, like, wow, I have bad information and data that does not support that. And so I started on hormones myself. So I'm on estrogen and progesterone, and I've added testosterone in the last year and a half or so. So for me, that was a solution and an option that has really worked and has really changed how I feel, how I think that I'm going to be able to live my life long term in terms of long-term health. That's important to me. I don't ever discard the lifestyle changes because I've done those as well. And it's been very instrumental in what I've needed to do to get the right sleep, to have my body feel better, to energize a little bit more, to figure out how to make sure my bones aren't weak. So those are all things that I do. But in terms of research, when we look at those, we still have 96% of women that are not taking hormones or think that they're dangerous or don't want to. And they're not for everybody. Everybody comes by this, this individually. But I want people to at least know what their options are and what's out there. And I think that was a reason for the film. So at least people can go in there and say, look, I learned this. Don't know if it's for me, but at least now I can have a conversation and start asking the right questions.
That's so important. And I love what you say about the lifestyle component, because it will augment any kind of medical intervention. One doesn't exist without the other.
100%.
So just thinking again about all that I took out of the documentary, and it's fresh in my mind, in particular, the work that Dr. Mosconi is doing now and around women's brains, and how not the behavioral side as we age, but really the biological impact of women's brains as we age, and the impact on hormones have on our brain health. Through your research and the hours and weeks of film, what were women saying about, depression or just brain fog? Like, how big of a role is the mental side?
I felt myself drawing into yourself and away from everyone, because nobody understands.
You know, I wish we had had more time to just really carve out 15 minutes to do, really do a deep dive into the mental side. Dr. Lisa Mosconi is brilliant, and her research, I think is life-changing. And she's always so gracious to, she always like talks about her team, and she's very, very humble in what she's done, but she's really changed this conversation. And so I'm thrilled about that, because I think that we're on the cusp of just learning so much more as we continue to do research and get more information. But brain fog, I think, the physical symptoms can be debilitating. We know that. We know, depending on how intense your symptoms are, how long that they last, how you're dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, lack of sleep. But the mental component, the mental health component, I think, is something that we have a lot more work to do there, because that feeling of that debilitating feeling, that feeling of irrelevance, that feeling of mood swings and rage and depression, like those aren't things that people should be laughing off. And I know that there's a typical example of a menopausal woman that's kind of hysteria, but that's not funny. And those are a lot of things that we have to take into consideration in terms of what we need to look for going forward, because there are women that feel like they're crazy. They feel like there's something wrong with them. They're fearing dementia. They feel very alone in this process. So we've got parts of this that we've got to get a handle on in a lot of ways, and make sure that all healthcare providers are aware of this. This isn't just up to OBGYNs to learn this information. This is for all healthcare providers to understand when, if you're a therapist or you're a psychiatrist and somebody comes into your office and is presenting with this number of symptoms, you want them to have that information. So they're part of this diagnosis and part of helping women determine whether or not we're talking about something that's menopause, or we're talking about something else. And so that's why I never want to put the blame on, doctors are the only ones that are they have to learn. It's all of us that are helping care for women, to make sure that they're aware of this information, or at least have the highlights of it to help.
Yeah, if the brain's not functioning in our mood, it just drives so much downstream impact to our loved ones and our capacity to function at work. I remember, and you shared your story about, going through your divorce around the time, menopause symptoms. Our generation of women in our 40s, if we think about what we're dealing with, aging parents, the death of our parents, divorces, kids at teen years that you do want to, there could be a murder, suicide in my house many days when I was dealing with my oldest son. There's a lot of pressure. I went to my doctor when my dad passed away in my mid-40s, when symptoms were rampant. And my longtime female family doctor prescribed antidepressants. I'm like, okay, this is acute or situational grief, but I'm not what do you mean? And it took the edge off, and it maybe masked some, symptoms for a while. But I thought, now, again, it brings up it's not an act of anger, but it's like, again, we know how we got here, but it's like, damn it. If I'd have been prescribed, or if I had gone on to HRT then versus only this year, I'd be so further ahead.
Yeah. What would have changed? Yeah, I agree with you. It's very frustrating. And there's a lot of women that we talk to that are very angry that they felt very left out of this conversation, and very left out of symptoms. And I understand why. I really do understand why.
And to take away, from what the work that you've done, that I've only been exposed to recently, and we need to share it. But one of the takeaways is, and as you're saying now, okay, we all have family doctors, they're doctors. It's not their fault. Their curriculum in med school was X and Y, but we need to scream from the rooftops, right? Like, we have to put our hand up and say, this isn't good enough.
It's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay at all. It's not okay. It's not okay for us. It's not okay for daughters. It's not okay for, this next generation. I've talked to so many young women this week, even in their mid-30s, that are like, I'm scared of what's to come. And I said, no. The reason for this information is so you don't have to be scared. And so, I'm hopeful that we get this out the right way. We get this out in a a way that empowers women more than anything else. That's really the goal, because there's no reason to be afraid. I think that the only thing I want women to do is really feel like they've got control of their health and they can reclaim their life and feel better than before. I mean, that's really my goal with all of this. And it took a long time for me to figure out where my voice was in this, in this area. And it really goes down to that storytelling component, because I think if we can see ourselves in somebody else, then we can continue to have that conversation and not feel alone. And I needed to feel not alone in order for me to start moving forward with some answers for myself.
Not alone. Plus, you've armed women with this work with all of the different components and the brightest minds and doctors in the space, because it's not connected. It's, someone's, specialty is the reproductive system and someone else is the brain. You have now synthesized all this information. So I can now go to Dr. Casperson's website. I can and learn all about that, or just all the different components that make up women's bodies. So you've given the education and the roadmap.
Thank you. I really, that's really what the goal was with the doc, and to expand it, into the book. So there's just some more information, because we could only fit a certain amount in the hour, because I think about it and I think of Dr. Jane Morgan, who's incredible with cardiology, and, Dr. Shelby Harris with sleep. But there's so many people that I wanted to introduce, and we had a limited time. So I think it was important to hit those big parts so women can make sure that they get those questions answered. And like you, I think that the mental aspect and brain is really, really important. So at least you can start functioning in a way that you feel like yourself or somewhat of yourself. So then you can, go look for answers.
Indeed. So I want to shift gears for a second, because as I was doing research and just looking at more of your Instagram stories and TikTok and your website, you connect with women so well. You have this massive following. What is the magic? Like, why? I always want to understand why. And now that I'm talking to you, you are making me feel like I'm the only person in the universe. You've just got this way of connecting. But tell us more about Tamsen, because we want to know about you and your journey as a journalist and finding love. If you don't mind sharing some personal stuff.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yes, I got married in menopause. So that's my love story.
That's a book.
My love story. Thank goodness for him. That's a book. I lost my mother at an early age. So that's, a lot of why breast cancer and that whole conversation has always kind of been such a big part of my life. And women's health, I didn't know anything about menopause. That was never really part of the conversation. I went to school for journalism, and I loved it because I love storytelling. But I love what I love about storytelling is the change that you see happen as a result of it. So whatever the story would be, we'd go into a neighborhood, we'd change, tell a story, and then I don't know, something would happen and a small business would blow up and be amazing. Or, we'd put somebody on a map and it would elevate their platform. And, we talk about what people were doing. Somebody got sick and then they created a business as a result of that and helped thousands of women. So I've always loved storytelling, no matter what it was. And then the other type of storytelling that I did for a long time, which was hard news, which was whether we were covering war or politics or whatever we were covering, because all of those impact our lives. And then when this happened in 2019, I didn't really have any intention of, I didn't even know what an advocate really was. I just knew that I was interested in the research of all of this and interviewing people. And so I probably did 40 interviews during the pandemic of all these different meeting people, pick up the phone, hi, Dr. Sharon Malone. My name is, I didn't know any of these people. But I realized quickly that they were doing incredible things, and they were talking to women the way that we needed to be talked to and be helped. And so I kind of dove into that area of the storytelling component of it. And once I asked enough questions, I was put in touch with one of my partners now, Joanne Lamarca. And I said to her, we were put together because a mutual friend said, I am so tired of you talking about menopause, and I'm so tired of hearing Tamsen talk about menopause. You guys just talk to each other. And she was a producer on the Today Show for a long time. And so we started talking to each other, and we said, wow, if we have all these questions and we're talking to all these women that have all these questions, maybe we should put it together, put some videos together and put it up on YouTube. That was literally what we were doing with this film. And then we went out to Times Square. We started interviewing people on our cell phones. And then we met two other women, Denise and Kobe, who were producers, and they had done documentaries before. And we said, instead of competing, let's put all of our resources together and see what we can do with this. So that's how the documentary happened. With social, I started talking about it during that time of the pandemic. I just went up on TikTok because I was, at the time I was like, I'm not going up on Instagram. I know people there. No way. And so I was like, I don't want anyone at work to know I'm going through this. They're going to think like I can't, like I'm too old for my job. And so I went up on TikTok and then started getting like a bunch of response. I listed the 34 symptoms that I had found in menopause. I thought I had discovered gold. I was like, 34 symptoms of menopause. I'm going to read them. And that's what I did. So that was like my first kind of entree into that. And then started talking about, I don't know, I was answering questions more really than anything else. And then I finally got brave and went to Instagram. And then that's really where I found this community that we have, really, I just love every day. I wake up and I'm like, okay, what are we talking about today? So I'm really grateful for this. I think that there's a lot of work to be done still, but I'm happy about the fact that women feel like they have a voice and they're not afraid to use it and they're not ashamed, because the fact that we talk about shame in women's health is ridiculous, and that those words can't be put together anymore.
Oh God, amen, sister. That's so true. There's something that connected with me. I think it was in the summer, one of your Instagram reels. It's Tamsen Fadal's Hard Truths. It was like boom, 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 one after the other. I just love them. Can you share some of them?
Yeah, I don't even know which ones I had. I did a couple of those different videos. I can tell you where they all come from. They all come from going through a very rocky, horrible divorce to finding love again at 40 something and getting married at 50 years old for a second time, and being in a career for the most part that was like one of these like very male dominated careers, and making a lot of mistakes. Like I made a ton of mistakes along the way. And so anytime I see something that I did and then like I realize what's going on now in my mind, I'm like, I have to share that so somebody else doesn't do what I did and make this mistake, because I think that's how we learn. Like, I mean, look, I think I'm happy I made some of my mistakes, but some of them I'd have been okay if I had passed those by. And so that's where I do the hard truths. And sometimes I get nervous when I post those. I'm like, oh gosh, what are people going to think? But then other times I'm like, oh, I don't care. This is the truth. So
there's a freedom in that, right? At our age,
yeah.
It's like, just screw it. I
have
like
a lot of the just screw it these days.
I'm going to say no to the 8th Christmas party, because no is a complete sentence. And you talk about either not people pleasing or boundaries. And I think your message that will really, because you have this capacity to connect with women, you'll give us the confidence to apply those to our life.
Gosh, I hope so. I mean, I think we do not have to give people explanations for anything. And that's what I did my whole life. Like, no, like I want to, but I can't, but here's why. And please love me, so that was like for a very long time. And now I'm like, this is who I am. And I will always like respect you and care about you. But if I have to do something else, like for myself, then that's just how it has to be. And I feel like as women, we've earned that. We spent a long time giving to everybody else, mentally, physically, emotionally. And this is our time. I say these are our golden years all the time, because I really believe that. I think this is a time to be bold, to do things for ourselves, to take care of ourselves. We throw around the word self-care a lot, but I don't know that we all know how to implement it, because it can be really hard because we feel like we're being selfish. But if your health and you don't come first during this time, it never will. And that's where I think a lot of those come from.
So good. So you have got a book coming out, How to Menopause. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that was really fun. It was fun and stressful, but fun to write, because I got to interview so many people, which I love to do. As you can see, that's a common theme. But also be able to do what I wish I had. I wish I had had a book like this that I could thumb through and be like, okay, I'm not sleeping. Okay, sex sucks. Okay, I don't know what the heck to do in my workplace. What do I do? And I think it was really important for me to be able to add the lifestyle component to the book so that I talk about all sorts of things, because I don't believe that perimenopause or menopause end in the doctor's office. I don't believe they end with, with any of those areas. I think they go into the bedroom. I think they go into the boardroom. I think they go beyond. I think they go into our closets. I think they go into how we present ourselves in the morning and feel good, how we are about self-care and nutrition and workout. And I can't, I don't think that it's always healthy to give women this big to-do list of things to do and then, hope you can be successful at that. So this book is actionables, and you take them when you can take them, and you flip it through. I was thinking of the book Simple Abundance when I was writing this. And I was like, I loved that book because I could flip over and be like, here's what I'm going to do today. And so I wanted the book to have actionables and takeaways in there from experts. And so it's really expert driven. But I say it's girlfriend approved because there are things that I've found that either worked for me or have worked for real women. And that was important for me to have real women scattered throughout the book. So throughout the book, real women's quotes are everywhere so that we all know that, we can see ourselves in the book somewhere.
That's important. That gives you that emotional connection. We're all going through this. 50% of the population goes through this. There has to be a way, there's the hormone option, the lifestyle option. There has to be a way just to make our daughter's generation get ahead of this, way before we're like surprised one day, as you talk about being on air and forgetting a word. And it's like, what the hell's going on, and being surprised. There will be no surprises.
No
so
surprises.
That's a good thing.
Yes, we do not need any surprises during this time in life, especially with this. Only good ones.
So what's next for you?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm going to be on a book tour, so that'll be fun. I think we're going to have a big event in March to celebrate. So I'm hopeful that we'll have a big announcement about that soon. And then I'm going to be doing a lot of the documentary screenings around the country. So I'm just popping up at different ones as much as I can. I love being in the rooms with all the women and seeing the conversation afterward, especially. And, I don't know, just keep having fun with this and sharing the message, because I think that's the most important. There's nothing that feels better to me than I see at the end of a screening, which I've been able to, go to a handful of them now, and see women like walk out of there and feel like they know what they want to do next, or at least feel empowered, that they're taking control of their own narrative. That feels really good to me. Really, really good.
It's huge. And so
we're going to get
your
there.
work, it's changing lives. That is for damn sure. And so we are so thankful for your time today. You're a journalist speaking to us on the day of the U.S. election. So that shows how passionate you are about this topic. Yeah, it's a big day. So thank you, Tamsen. It was an absolute delight.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the time.